Hello, everyone. We're just doing the pre-show thing here right now, and I'm trying to get Facebook working, which is not going exceptionally well. I think I got it. Apparently, Facebook has changed some of their URLs and whatnot. I hope everyone is doing well today. I am not feeling so well. I almost canceled the stream today. It's still unable to connect. Well, that is not good. Okay, wait a minute. Looks like it's working. Sheesh. See, this is why we got to do the pre-show. Hello, everyone. We've got about 10 minutes till the show is going to officially start. And part of that process is just to make sure everything is working as it should, but also to entertain questions that some of you might have that may or may not be real estate related. During the pre-show, anything goes. Okay, we're working on YouTube. Really crazy numbers. I mean, the numbers that we're seeing right now for our local markets is, if anything, the indication we're about to pivot, right? Because some numbers still indicate a kind of strong market, while others are absolute indicators of a market absolutely moving away from sellers and towards buyers. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to try to bring a little sanity to the conversation. And I guess it would help if I went live on Facebook. I didn't click the button. There we go. All right, we are live on Facebook. Welcome to the pre-show. For those of you who are here, I see I've already got one person in the pre-show, which is kind of awesome. So somebody was waiting. Whoever you are, thank you very much. If you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to use the comment section. I will be happy to answer those questions throughout the show. So feel free to chime in if you've got any questions or comments. It looks like we're up and running. We've got somebody watching on X. Looks like we have... It says there's an unstable frame rate for LinkedIn. Yeah, we're up on LinkedIn. So we're up on all the usual spots. I like to just make sure the primary ones are at least working here. And it looks like we're good. Excellent. All right, we've got about 8 minutes until we're going to kick the show off officially. If this is your first time with me, keep in mind this is something we do on the third Saturday of every month. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a real estate broker right here in Silicon Valley. I have been doing this since 1988, so for a very long time, and I'm happy to help anyone with their buying, selling, and investing needs in Silicon Valley. Now, we focus on Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy, and I like to do that because we get really big numbers in Santa Clara County. The larger the numbers, the better data you can extract from that, right? Have bigger sample size is better data. And then San Jose is the biggest city within Santa Clara County, so we get a slightly more focused view, and then we just drill down to the two smaller communities of Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And of course, one of the goals here is to enjoy a wonderful cup of coffee as we are doing our thing. So as I was saying, you'll be able to comment. The comments should show up. You know what? We're in pre-show, so let me use that so you can see my ugly mug. Hey, happy Saturday. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend planned. And as I said earlier, we have got a huge chunk of data to review. And by huge, I don't necessarily mean the volume of data, but I do mean the implications of the data. So we're going to take a look at that. Some very interesting numbers. Some areas starting to show what I think is likely to come as we move forward with trying to anticipate where this market's going to go. It's also always good to look at places that I consider to be sort of canary in the coal mine places, right? Places like Phoenix, some communities in Florida. These are places that tended to see the bad things earlier than a lot of other markets. So that's one reason why I like to do that. So we'll I didn't actually pull up any data from Florida or Phoenix. We can do that, though. I've got my data source up. And, of course, I can use that to answer any of your questions, too, regardless, right? Whatever you're interested in. But I'd love this to become a conversation, and the goal is always to share that here so that everybody can benefit. And don't get me wrong, I very much appreciate those of you who, after the show, will reach out to me. And I get that some of you aren't able to check us out, aren't able to join me here on a Saturday morning. And so you watch the show usually in the following days or weeks. And I absolutely appreciate those of you who check in with me and ask me questions and want to have a chat about what you're up to or areas that are interesting to you. But it's always better to get those questions answered here during the live chat so that everybody can benefit from the answers in the discussion, right? Even if we don't come up with a definitive answer, it might give somebody that extra little nudge or little nugget of information they need to make the decision they want to make. We're about 5 minutes away from the show officially starting. I'd like to welcome a couple of folks who've shown up for the pre-show. Thank you very much. I don't see your names. I just see a number. So thank you very much. One other thing to keep in mind is most of the chat stuff, with the exception of Facebook, will actually show up on the screen, like right there. So, wow, did I cut myself shaving this morning? That's unfortunate. Anyway, so you'll be able to see it, but of course, I'll also mention the question and try to share what I consider to be the answer to that question during the show. We're just a little over 4 minutes until the kickoff of the show. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them now. We can either just go ahead and answer them now, or we can wait. If they're super real estate related, or even what's going on in our local markets related, it might be smarter to take your question and then hold it till we hit a slide maybe that comes closest to really exploring the answer to that question. But like I said, it's really about sharing knowledge. One other thing, and I know this has been something that's been bouncing around for a while. Last year in August, we had that really big change in how buyers compensate their real estate agents. And I've had a podcast in the queue. It's not done. I mean, I've kind of written up the basic outline and all that kind of wonderful stuff. And I realize it's now been, I think as of March, it's been a year since the last podcast. And that's just terrible. And I apologize. But it's been a super busy year. I've had a lot of things sort of offline that I've been doing. I took a little time off last year to kind of explore personal investment stuff. On the heels of selling my investment property in Hawaii, I've really been looking at where I want to put that. And actually, to be honest, I had hoped to have that reinvested by now. But, you know, the more indicators I see, the more sense it made to wait. And some of the data we'll see here today, I think, bears that out. So let's see. We're just 3 minutes away. Feel free to just any comments or questions you might have, feel free to share those, and I'll be happy to field them. Is there anything else going on that's like totally not focused on real estate that's interesting? Obviously there's the tariffs, right? That are a thing. A lot of people seem to think that tariffs will circumvent supply and demand, and that's just not really the way that works. Tariffs may make things more expensive, but only in the near term, only in the short term, because the market is what the market is. If if folks aren't willing to pay what homes are selling for today, they're not going to be willing to pay next week if they're charging more for those homes. So the market will do what the market does. The market adapts. That's what's great about a free market is it's nimble because it's other people's money, right? It's people who care about their money, who have taken risks and are involved in these different efforts. So they will figure something out. That's kind of the way the markets work. I'm not a tariffs guy. I'm not a fan of tariffs, but I'm also not a fan of Chinese imports. And that's a whole. We could do shows and shows and shows about that stuff. And China has absolutely been abusing us for many, many decades in terms of trade. So I'm kind of A-okay with trying to address that. And it seems like the policy or the plan here is to try to use tariffs as a way to get people to the negotiation table, and that seems to have worked. And I know what the administration put a pause on tariffs for 90 days to try to work all those out. But I have no issues, and I realize there's an awful lot of industry tied to China, and I think that is a bad thing. China is not a trustworthy trade partner. They never have been. I'm in Silicon Valley, so all these folks who make stuff in China find that their intellectual property gets ripped off all the time. Everybody from Cisco to Apple, and now we find there is one of those robot dog looking things, and they discover it's got a back door in it that constantly is in contact with a server in China. And I'd love to get an explanation for that. Maybe it's just looking for new firmware, but it seems to be that's something that doesn't seem like it should do without the input of the owner or user. But this is common. Even medical equipment that was made in China has back doors where remotely they can change the readings of the device. They can screw with the device in all kinds of different ways, and it reports data back to a server in China. So, and again, I realize that's not real estate, but it does indicate the trustworthiness of China as a trading partner. All right, folks, the clock has ticked over. We are now finally basking in the glow of 10 a.m. I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning for Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. This is something we've been doing now for years. I don't even know how many years I've been doing this. I lost track at some point. But I'm your host, Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker and realtor right here in Santa Clara County. Ready to help you with whatever buying, selling, or investing needs you might have. And even if you just want to have a chat about real estate markets or things you're thinking about relating to real estate, feel free to reach out to me, and you can find me at soldbyrobert.com, where you can also get a free home value estimate. And, I want to say something about that at the top because I find it very interesting. I was looking at several off-market properties that were about to go on market. And I always like to get calibrated to what some of the popular sites are saying about a property before they know it's on the market, right? So Zillow and Trulia, which are actually both owned by the same company, Redfin, what are they estimating is the value of that property? And then compare it to what they estimate the value of that property to be after it gets listed. And what I found was in a few cases, in one very dramatic case, all of these online value estimating tools were saying, let's just use round numbers, we're saying $300,000 was what the home was worth. Not an unusual, it's somewhere in the ballpark. These online tools tend to be pretty wrong. But I think they also have sometimes motivations in them that go beyond just trying to get the right market value. But then if you look at them right after they list, right after they've shown up on Zillow as a listing, suddenly, magically, let's say it lists for $410,000, right, which is $110,000 above what Zillow thought it was worth yesterday. You go and you look, and suddenly, magically, Zillow says the house is worth $415,000. And this happens every single time that I look. And if someone hadn't looked before it went on the multiple listing service, which is 99.999% of all buyers, virtually 100%, they're not going to realize that just 24 hours earlier, Zillow was saying a number that was $110,000 lower, right? So why am I telling you this? Primarily, you don't want to trust the systems that are in place and most popular. Now, the system I use, I have noticed that prior to listing and after listing, the value of the home does not change. In other words, just listing it for X amount of dollars does not change what that tool is estimating the property value to be. And I like that. I can go in and look, and it's basing that on comparable properties, close to the same square footage, bedrooms, baths, location, that sort of thing. Without this weird, well, some realtor posted it for X amount of money, so it must be worth that, right? So just a warning to you, and it's another reason why I think buyers benefit from having a real estate agent represent them. And I was mentioning how I've got a podcast planned and ready to get started relating to these big changes that have happened for buyers. It has never been, 2025 is the first year where buyers are at probably the biggest disadvantage I think they've ever been in, just because it's a transitionary period. And maybe I'll save all that chat for the podcast. So feel free to find my podcast at soldbyrobert.com as well. But let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk numbers. That's why you're here. You're not here for all these other things. So let's go ahead and check out this. Okay. You know what? Let's get my ugly mug out of the way of the numbers there. All right. So as we always do, we're starting with the inventory note. This is the total number of homes on market. And if you think about it from the standpoint of a buyer, this is how many homes were on the shelves, right? If there was a home store and you walked in and every house was on the shelf, this is how many homes you had to choose from. If you're a seller, this is your competition, right? You are one home, and there are 1,911 other homes that were on the market in Santa Clara County. And just look at this number, because it's absolutely nuts. And this is the first nugget of information that I want to share relating to my proposition that the market is in transition, right? Look at that jump in inventory. We had 979 homes in Santa Clara County overall in March of 2024. In March of 2025, 1,912. That's a 95% increase. That's almost double, right? Now, keep that in mind. Just to use round numbers, think twice as many homes, right, for sale. In San Jose, that was up 90%, 441 homes last year, 837 homes this year for March of 2025. And Morgan Hill is nuts. 33 homes last year, 89 homes this year. That's a 170% increase in the same time last year. And Gilroy, 63 homes last year, 90 homes this year for a 43% increase. Those are ridiculous numbers. And that is the second month in a row for Morgan Hill, I believe, where we've had a greater than a 100% increase in the total number of homes on the market. So just think about that for a second. Really huge, earth-shatteringly gigantic numbers relating to inventory. And that's across the board. Now, let's see. The next thing we're going to look at is new listings. So these are homes that were listed, and we're going to see a pretty substantial increase there as well. Now, last year we had 1,395 homes listed in the month of March of 2024. And we've got 1,960 this year. That's a 41% increase from the same time last year in the county. There was a 34% increase in San Jose, where there were 668 homes last year, 898 homes in San Jose this year. Morgan Hill, a 55% increase, 47 homes last year, 73 homes this year. And Gilroy, a 40% increase, 47 homes last year, 66 homes this year. Again, this shows momentum, right? It shows not only this is the inventory we've gotten that we've accumulated, this is inventory we're adding to the overall inventory of homes on the market. So all in all, absolutely stacking the homes available for sale right now. Next, let's take a look at the total number of homes that sold. Now, remember, we're talking insane double-digit numbers in terms of accumulations of properties, huge increases in the number of homes that are being accumulated. Look at these scrawny home sales change numbers from the same time last year. Now, remember, again, all of this data we're looking at is comparing March of last year to March of this year. So all the same market influences are at play, right? Because we're dealing with the same time of year. Excuse me. I am on the cusp of being unbelievably sick. Right now I've got a fever of 101. So I apologize if I start slurring my words or drooling on myself. Just not feeling real well. But anyway, I digress. So check it out. The biggest increase is the county at 6%. A 6% increase in the number of homes sold. Remember, we had a 95% increase just in inventory and a 41% increase in the number of homes put on the market. That is a feeble number. It's not only feeble compared to where the inventory numbers are, it's feeble compared to just this time of year. And remember, we're still comparing to the same time last year, but it's the fact that we're seeing so much of an increase in inventory with such a small increase in sales just indicates we're going to see a continuing accumulation of inventory. And usually by now, we're starting to, if we're going to see big upticks in the market, usually it's starting about now. And it's also reflected in the pending sales, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, because that's also another brick in this wall that it is absolutely an indicator of a changing market. Okay, next, let's go ahead and talk. Well, before we leave homes sold, let's take a moment to think about what did this do to the total inventory? Did we add to the inventory or did we subtract to the inventory based on the number of homes sold? We dramatically added, right? In terms of Santa Clara County, in this cycle of March, we added 958 homes, almost 1,000 homes to the market that now need to get sold in the following months. In San Jose, we added 403 homes to the market. In Morgan Hill, we added 39, and in Gilroy, we added 38. So all across the board, we are absolutely just accumulating more inventory. The months of inventory is also an interesting number to look at. This is the theory behind months of inventory is if you were to freeze the total inventory where it is right now and freeze the number of homes that are selling, this is how many months it would take for the month of March to sell off that inventory. 4 months is considered balanced. 4.5 months is considered balanced. We haven't been anywhere near 4 months in a very, very long time. But we are reaching numbers that we have not seen in decades, like since the 2008 downturn. Excuse me. So in Santa Clara County, we had 1 month of inventory in March of last year. We have 1.9 months of inventory for March of 2025. That's a 90% increase from the same time last year. San Jose, basically the same increase, 89%. It was 0.9, less than a month last year. Now it's 1.7. Excuse me. Morgan Hill, up 160%. 1 month last year, 2.6 this year. And in Gilroy, it was up 39%. 2.3 months last year, 3.2 months this year. So Gilroy is quickly heading for a market that is quote-unquote balanced if all we look at is the months of inventory. So everything is heading in a direction. And so below about 4.5 months would be, just using this data set, a seller's market. Anything above that would be considered a buyer's market. But I think what we're going to try to do here is make the argument that while this is one piece of data for that, the other pieces of data also tend to push us in a direction of believing that we're heading into much more of a buyer's market. Now, next, let's take a look at the homes pending and contingent. And what this means is, in the month of March, the status of a property changed to pending or contingent based on the idea that the seller accepted an offer. Why do we care? Because it's a leading indicator of what we'll see for sales next month, right? Because in order for a home to close escrow and sell, it needs to accept an offer. That's what this number represents. And here's the scary part. I don't know about you, but according to the data I've been looking at for decades, April is supposed to be a big month. April is supposed to be one of the starting months and we'll see it. I've got a chart here that'll show you. But check that out. Santa Clara County pending and contingent homes is down 1%. So from a year ago, last year we had 1,192. This year, 1,185. So, not a huge difference there, but it's down, meaning we will see fewer homes sold next month in April than we did in 2024 in April. And that's not supposed to happen at this time of year. San Jose was only up 1%. 571 last year, 575 this year. Again, indicating a complete slump in the number of accepted offers for the month of March. It's going to be a bloodbath in terms of how much more inventory gets accumulated. Now, Morgan Hill saw a 31% increase in the number of pending or contingent homes, 36 last year, 47 this year, and Gilroy saw 21% increase, 28 homes last year, 34 this year. And let's see, is there any other additional? No. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at average original list price. I like looking at average original list price. I occasionally will get an agent who reaches out to me after one of these shows and goes, why do you even track that number? What good is it? And I feel like I make a good case for why we should track it. It calibrates you, particularly if you're a buyer. It calibrates you to what the expectations are for sellers. We've got an article to cover here about expectations of sellers. But this is a scenario where this is the number that was entered into the MLS when it was first listed for sale. So when that real estate agent went into that seller's living room and convinced them to list their home for sale, the price they wrote down that they were going to ask for it, that's this number. This is the number where the seller went, yeah, I can sell my home for that amount. So sellers are calibrated at the start of the home's listing for this amount of money. And in most cases, they're thinking they're going to get it or they're going to get more. That's my experience with folks who list their homes. So let's go ahead and do a quick rundown here. And remember, these are just the expectations. This isn't what homes sold for. This is what sellers wanted to sell their homes for. In Santa Clara County, the number was up 7.4%. Last year, the average was 1,889,000. This year, the number was 2,029,000. San Jose was up 4.6%, 1,416,000 versus 1,481,000 this year. And Morgan Hill, which frequently happens in Morgan Hill, 1,451,000 last year, 1,603,000 this year for a 10.4% increase. And we will see here in a moment what's going on with price reductions. And folks having to lower their prices to get sold. But Morgan Hill always tends to be a little bit more bloated in that respect. Gilroy is up 13.9%, 1,244,000 last year, 1,417,000 this year. That may be a bit of a fluke just because of the smaller sample size. But in general, I have found sellers in Gilroy to be more calibrated to the realities of what market we're in. I'm not going to bet my life on that one anymore. But that has been the trend. And I think moving forward, Gilroy is another one of those cities where after we've seen things happen in Phoenix or in communities in Florida that indicate the market's taking a turn, Gilroy is one of the first areas in our local market that tend to make a change based on this, meaning that they're a leading indicator of a downturn in the rest of the market for Santa Clara County. All right, next, let's take a look at average sales price. So this is what homes actually sold for. And we can see across the board, it's all up, right? With the exception of Gilroy, which is interesting, right? Given the inventory numbers, given the supply and low demand. But remember, these are things that closed in March. My guess is we may see this as a much more narrowing number. And maybe even more, and also Morgan Hill had a negative number, and more negative numbers as we move forward. So let's just go ahead and review them real quickly. Santa Clara County, in terms of actual home sales prices, was up 9.8%, 1,921,000 last year, 2,110,000. San Jose was 1,512,000 last year, 1,588,000 this year for a 5% increase. Morgan Hill was down 9.7%, 1,587,000 last year, 1,433,000 this year. And Gilroy was down 0.8%, or 1,347,000 last year, 1,337,000 this year. So already we're starting to see some indicators that we may see a softening market. I would never project forward based on 1 month's data from a Morgan Hill or a Gilroy just because the sample size is too small. I mean, remember, we're talking about handfuls of homes versus hundreds of homes that happen in Morgan Hill and Gilroy versus San Jose and Santa Clara County overall. So now let's take these numbers and think about, this is the real number. We just talked about original list price, which is the hoped for number. How far off were the actual sales prices from the hoped for prices on the part of sellers. And did sellers get more or less than they hoped for? Well, in Santa Clara County overall, sellers got more than they hoped for, to the tune of $80,689. San Jose, which kind of went hog wild, if you compare what they got in sales prices versus what their expectations were for homes that were listed in March, sellers came out above expectations by $107,432. Then we get to Morgan Hill, where expectations were 1.6 million, reality was 1.4 million, which resulted in sellers coming in below, selling below what they were hoping for, to the tune of $169,475. And Gilroy also tended to sell below hoped for prices, to the tune of $80,954. So I find that interesting. And again, I think that historically Gilroy has been a little bit better calibrated. Morgan Hill has always been a little bit disconnected. And I think that's why we tend to see the acceptance of offer prices much more below asking price than, or much below expectations than in other areas. Next, let's take a look at the percent over or under asking price. So this number kind of blows me away. I'm going to be honest. But this is one reason why I'm describing our market as a market in transition, because I don't think this number is going to stay where it is. I don't think it can. Think about what's going on with supply and demand, with the huge supply and the dramatically low demand compared to that. Now look at this. We see that last year at this time in Santa Clara County, homes were selling at 107.7% of asking price. Meaning, and when we look at this, keep in mind, this isn't compared to the original list price. This is whatever the list price was at the time the home sold. So if the home price was increased or decreased, that's the home price the buyer was seeing. And why do we look at it like that? Because we want to see where buyers were willing to go with the purchase price versus the price they were actually faced with when they looked up the home. So if a home started at $1 million, nobody gave it any attention, then it dropped down to $700,000. A buyer comes and sees it at $700,000 and wants to make an offer. This is showing a percentage of how above or below asking price they were willing to go to make that purchase happen at that price, right? So it's down 1.1% from the same time last year in terms of just overall numbers. It's down to 106.6, but that still means that the average home in Santa Clara County was selling for 6.6% over asking price, which is still pretty nuts, right? San Jose down 2% from the same time last year, where it was 107.7 last year, but it's 105.7 this year. But again, still indicates that homes are selling for 5.7% over asking price, and that implies multiple offers in the month of February, right? Because anything that closed in March would have been an offer would have been accepted in February, right, for it to close in March. I also think that's one reason why this feels like a transitionary set of data. Morgan Hill actually went up. It went the other way. 101.9 last year, 102.1 this year. So that's a 2.1% over asking price trend in Morgan Hill. Gilroy also up 101.2% versus 101.6, so 1.6% over. And I think a lot of this indicates sort of the movement of buyers. I've had more buyers, and this has been a trend now for probably close to a year. Folks shifting their searches from places like San Jose or Los Gatos or Almaden or Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Cupertino, wherever, Campbell. I think of Campbell because I had folks looking at Campbell who've now moved their search to Gilroy because they've realized they can get same size house. And if they're looking in, they can find neighborhoods that are just as good as Campbell, right? Northwest and Northeast, Gilroy jumped to mind in terms of just amazing neighborhoods right around Christopher High School in Northwest. Gilroy is a beautiful area. I'd live there in a heartbeat. Where they can get a whole lot more house, or at least within their budget, they can get the house that they want, that they would have wanted to buy in Campbell, but not at the crazy price they would have paid in Campbell. So that's where we are, and remember, these are all based on offers that were accepted in February and closed in March. So this lags a little behind, and I think that when we get up to the minute data, we're going to see this is softening even further. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next chunk here. Next, we're going to look at days on market. This is how many days it took for homes to get sold in March. It was down 6% in Santa Clara County, 17 days last year, 16 days this year. Down 13% in San Jose. It was 16 days last year, 14 days this year. And in Morgan Hill, it was up 45%, 20 days last year, 29 days this year. And in Gilroy, up 27%, 22 days last year, 28 days this year. Days on market is an interesting one, and it's also one that we'll frequently see an artificial jump in the number, even though the market has gone nuts. And the reason is because when you have a big chunk of inventory that's been lingering for a while, when a big buying surge comes, you end up selling the homes that have been listed, plus a whole bunch of homes that were already listed and sitting in inventory for a really long time. So you'll see this jump in days on market when the market's actually going crazy. We had one of those, I think, last month, and I already sort of covered this data, but I like to make sure people understand that just because for the most recent month this number goes up, that doesn't really mean much of anything in terms of, okay, well, I should conclude, since these numbers are down, that everything's really hopping, and that may or may not be the truth. The fact that we have so much inventory and days are so low indicates to me that we're not selling off old inventory. What's happening is homes are getting listed. The best homes in those various categories are selling quicker, and the rest are languishing on market. And then there's markets like Morgan Hill where we're really just coming into a place where the number of buyers is drying up, and we're just seeing that reflected in these numbers. All right, next. This is going to be a look over the shoulder. So now this is not about what was happening a year ago in the same month, right? This is all about, over time, what trends have we been seeing? And from those trends, what kind of expectations can we extract? What can we guess? How can we gaze into our crystal ball of numbers to figure out what's going to happen in the coming months? Oh, I hope all of you are enjoying some coffee. I was toying with not doing coffee. Usually what I do when I'm not feeling well is just really take in a lot of electrolytes, and I've got a whole jug of those here too, but I don't know. It felt right to have some coffee this morning. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at total active listings. Look at that. It's at the highest point going back to September of 2022. And it's a dramatic jump. So from December of 2024 to now has been a steady climb. If we look at the same time last year, it's always been more gradual, right? Look at December of 2022 to December to March of 2023. I mean, that's almost flat, right? There's a small increase, but it's a handful of homes. Look at December to March of 2023 to 2024. More of an increase, but still very gradual. And then we get December of 2024 to March of 2025, and it's a sheer cliff. Look at that. It just goes straight up. It's very interesting. The inventory has surpassed what has been the peak in the past. Like, we should see that in April and May. It is typical to see inventory increase as people want to get their homes sold for the season, which is typically understood to be the end of May, June, and July. But in recent years, in terms of listings, what we've seen is folks go on the market earlier. They tend to go on the market in January and February and March. So, but let's go ahead and take a look at the next thing here. Next is new listings. That's the green bar. And new listings is right up there, beating out overall inventory. And we can see that we haven't hit the peak, right? The last peak was May of 2024 in terms of homes going on the market. But I think we're likely to exceed that because look at where that is. Look at where that peak is. That peak is 2 months after March, in May. And that's, as I said, it tends to, you can see that we also had last year, March and April, there was a big jump from December to March of 2023 to 2024. So we tend to, and we look at the jump in 2023 in March, right? In the month previous, we just had this humongous jump. So it's normal to see a jump in homes getting listed for the coming season. But you can see, obviously, with the big jump we had in 2024, sales were keeping up with it, because despite the fact we had that huge jump, the total number of homes on the market was far below it. Next, let's take a look at total number of homes sold. And what we want to do here is really get a feel for the change. So January is usually where I look at this number and look at the change. And we can see it's a pretty steep, respectable increase. If we look at January of 2024, I think the increase is slightly less pronounced. And I think in 2023, 2023, we had that weird uptick from February to March, but without the degree of increase in new inventory, right? So the bottom line is, given where these very average numbers are, because remember, close to zero change in inventory, right? There was a 1% change in inventory for the county. So we're seeing all of this similar performance to a year ago, but we're not seeing any increase that would offset this huge accumulation of properties. And finally, we look at pending homes. That's the gold line. And we can see from December to March, it's been a pretty steady increase, with a more of a dramatic increase between December and February, and then a slight slowdown in the increase up to March. We can see that in December to March of 24, bigger increases in terms of pendings. Remember, pendings are a future indicator of what's going to happen next month. And then in March of 2023, we see another, from December to like January to March, we see a pretty steady increase. But that's a dramatic increase in the total number of pendings in last year's number versus what we're seeing in this year's number. What's interesting is the number of homes sold between February and March actually seems to have an increased slope upwards, whereas the pendings had it looks to me like a pivot downward. So I think it's interesting that those two numbers are where they are. And something I think that will be interesting to watch as we move forward. Next, this is Santa Clara County list price, the original list price. What, did I hit it twice? Yeah, I did. That's a mistake. Dag nabbit. Bear with me for a moment here. I promise I'll get you there. There we go. Okay. So always interesting when these numbers cross. And right now we've got average list price, original list price, taking a dip. Now for the last couple of months, average sales prices have been below original list price. And now they've dipped below, so that the original list price is below average sales price. So expectations now are not being met by what homes actually sell for, whereas, no, I've got that backwards. So average sales price is beating out expectations, whereas for the past couple of months, it wasn't, right? We were seeing expectations not being met. I don't see that as being a sustainable thing. My guess would be, moving forward, we're going to see sales prices flattening or coming down in the coming months. And we can see the tool I use to guesstimate what's going to happen in certain markets indicates that as well. So I'll share that with you as soon as we finish reviewing the numbers. Again, while we're in the middle of the data here, if you have any questions or observations you'd like to make, feel free to post your comment. I'll be happy to answer. It looks like we've got a few people on a couple of different platforms. Nobody on Facebook, interestingly. But on a couple other platforms, it looks like we've got some folks poking in. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the graph of all of that data relating to percent of asking price. We can see our pretty obvious peak of 109% back in April of 24. And I'll be surprised. I'll tell you, I'm surprised at the amount over asking price that properties have been getting in February and March. We were down to the point we were at 103.5 in January, with a huge jump. And if we look at January of last year, we can see we had the same sort of jump that led us right into the summer months, with, again, our peak being in April. And that's this month, right? So we should, if we're going to see a peak, we should see it here, but we don't. We see February of last year being pretty high, March of last year being higher. If we look at the year before that, here, let me just do this here. So here we are. Here's March. Here's February, increase. Here's February, and here's March, increase. And then it usually peaks in April, right? Or July, if it's 2023. This year, we're seeing a dramatic increase between January and February, and then a drop between February and March. The opposite of the trend in both of those previous years. So that indicates to me that while we're heading into the market where this should be getting the strongest, it's softening. And in my mind, that's an indicator of a deeper softening in the market. We'll see where it goes, but that's an interesting indicator. And it is based on county numbers, so it's the biggest sample size we've got. And I think this should be a concern because it deviates so completely from the past. But so does inventory numbers. So do number of homes sold versus inventory numbers. All of those numbers indicate a softening. And again, as I said, this data represents what trends were starting to kick in about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So that's what we're seeing happening here, right? Because the offers that were accepted in February are the ones that closed in March, which then feeds this, right? So it's actually about attitudes in buyers' heads and what they're willing to offer above or below asking price in February, not March. All right. Let's take a look at Santa Clara County days on market. I don't think there's any big surprises here. The numbers are way down. We had them peak in January. They actually dropped down further than I would have expected, given the other data we've seen in February and March. But again, because there's that dynamic, I think that what's happening is, because we've had dramatically low sales numbers, I think the reason why we're seeing a dramatic drop in days on market is because those homes that are selling are the ones that just listed and were the best in their category, and the other stuff that's been on the market forever isn't selling. So I think we've got this stock of inventory that is racking up days on market every single day because they're not getting offers on them and they're not closing. And when this trend finally changes and suddenly buyers come back out, we will see a huge jump in the number of days on market, because we'll have homes that have been on the market for 40, 50, 60 days that are suddenly getting an offer because there's just nothing else. If this, and again, this is an indicator potentially of a slowing, and I realize that's counterintuitive, but just keep in mind the reason why this is so low is because the homes that are selling, and not all of them are compared to last year, is simply because the only homes that are selling are the ones that are the best in their category, in their markets right now. And other stuff is aging in the pile of homes on inventory. Next. Okay, now this is an interesting one. This is one I almost stopped tracking last time because I thought its relevance was starting to dwindle, but now I think it's back with a passion. So Santa Clara County, this is the total percent of homes on the market that have had a price reduction. Not just homes that have sold, just homes that have had a price reduction, right? Just in general. In Santa Clara County, last month, 13% of the homes on the market had a price reduction. This month, that is 20%. So in 1 month, we went from seeing 13% of homes have a price reduction, jumping up to 20. That's a 125% increase from the same time last year. So from March to March, that's a 125% increase in the number of homes that have had a price reduction. In San Jose last month, that number was 15%, jumped up 5 points to 20% this month, which is a 148% increase from the same time last year, from March of last year. Morgan Hill only had 6% of homes with a price reduction last month. This month, it's 24%. So it went from being the lowest number of homes with a price reduction on this list to being the highest number of homes reduced on this list, with a 110% increase in the same time last year. And the reason why I was making those comments about Morgan Hill being in a position where it frequently lists homes above, it wants to get more for homes above what the market will bear. This is what happens when that happens. You start to see more and more homes having to see a price reduction before they're going to get any offers made. Which also brings me to another point. a lot of people are afraid that they're going to offend a seller if they do a low ball offer. And I don't suggest you do just a low ball offer. If you're going to do an offer that is substantially below asking price, include the comparables, right? Have your agent put together the comparables to say, hey, we love your home, but we're just seeing that in today's market, this is what this home is worth. So you don't want to make it a personal thing. If you do, they'll turn you down just because you've offended them. But if you base it just on data, you're going to be in a much better place. It's a strategy I use all the time, where if I'm going to come in below, I will share market data relating to why my decision was what it was. Finally, Gilroy, 15% last month, 19% this month of March. That's a 21% increase from the same time last year. But Gilroy has been in this mode a lot longer than everywhere else for like over a year. So I think that's one reason. They also haven't had to do as many price reductions. One reason why I was commenting that they tend to be more calibrated to the market is because they have been. Homes haven't been listing at crazy above market value levels. And so we've tended to see lower need to reduce those asking prices. But that changed a little bit over the last couple of months, where it went up a little bit to the point where we saw 19% of them in the month of March. All right. I think that covers the data. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them into the comments section or the chat. Happy to answer them for you. Let's see. I don't see anybody on Facebook. Where's everybody else? I'm not sure what else I'm seeing here. I don't see the other numbers. But anyway, now let's go ahead and take a minute to look at some of the articles that I've put together. And I've put together far fewer articles than usual just because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to to make it all the way through today's show. I hope this is valuable data for you. If anything, this should be making you think that a time may be coming where you're going to make a move. And, I mentioned earlier that I sold my investment property in Hawaii. For those of you who have been following me on my website or through my podcast or through this, I've sort of occasionally shared insights into that. But it really emphasizes one of the things that I've been saying for a while now. And that is, when you're buying an investment property, you also need to take into account how landlord friendly a municipality and a state are or are not. And Hawaii is just absolutely not on the side of property owners, particularly if you want to do vacation rentals. It appears to me that the state of Hawaii is extremely in bed with hotel lobbyists, which makes sense. I mean, that's one of their big money makers is tourism. So they want to make it extremely difficult for folks to do, say, a VRBO or whatever. But I did it. I stretched it out for a little over 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And finally, it just got to the point where it was ridiculous. So I ended up selling that. And my goal now is to take the proceeds from that and put it into the next investment. And I'm not really looking. I could do it right here in Silicon Valley. But you know what? I'm not as interested in appreciation. I'm interested in steady cash flow and just a steady generation of cash. So you really, that in your mind, you need to weigh, all right, I'm going to get better appreciation here in this marketplace, but the state potentially will have me not being able to collect rent for months and months, maybe even years, if someone defaults. And is that something I'm okay with, right? Whereas in other places, that's not the case. If they stop paying their rent 90 days later, 60 days later, 30 days later, they're gone. And if they won't leave, the sheriff helps them out. I very much believe that the rights of a property owner should be as respected as the rights of a tenant. And the rights of a tenant are absolutely described in a lease agreement, and that is it. If they don't conform to the agreement of the lease, then they should be out. That's just, I'm sorry. I know some people disagree with me strongly on that, but that's how this has to work. Everybody's rights have to be respected. And the state simply saying, well, this person can't pay their rent, so you can't kick them out, should not be a thing that happens. It just shouldn't be. And I realize that whenever people think about landlords, they think about top hats, monocles, and twirling the mustache. That is the minority observation I've made with investors. For the most part, folks that I've helped buy a home to have it be a rental, or folks who I've advised about how to move forward with making their home or property a rental. These are folks who have 1, 2, 3 properties tops. One is very common, and it's their retirement. It's part of their retirement income, and you are dramatically hurting those folks. And I've heard some people say, well, we should make special rules for folks who own less than 4 properties. Well, why? Property rights are property rights. I don't care if it's held by a corporation or by an individual. They're either rights or they're not. So it's again, we could do a whole show just on that. Let's see here. You know what? Let me check something real quick. Well, why?
Yeah. Okay.
Property right. I thought my audio wasn't working. I wasn't seeing the. There it is. I wasn't seeing the balance moving on when I was speaking. Anyway, sorry. That would have sucked to have talked all that time without any audio going out. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. Weekly housing trends. This is from Realtor.com. I think I highlighted a few things in here. So what's interesting here is that active inventory climbed 31.2% nationally from a year ago. Remember, our inventory jumped 95% from the same time last year. So we are accumulating homes dramatically more quickly than overall in the nation. In this, home spent 4 days longer on the market than last year. We saw the exact opposite. That it was down 1 day, right? We went from 17 days in Santa Clara County to 16 days, so it went down 1. And the median list price was flat, and we didn't see that. They're talking about median. I don't understand why median is what they report. It feels like average is better. Median is the number where if there were 10 numbers, the median is the number that where there's 5 above and 5 below, right? And average is simply you take the total number of homes. You would take the all the prices and divide it by the total number of homes, and then you'd get the average price, right? But anyway, so that is that. I just saw what just came through. Oh, good. Yeah, here's somebody. Let's go ahead and let's see, block and block. There we go. All right. No garbage in my chat. We don't tolerate that. Anyway, so those are the numbers. And if we want to just see sort of a general breakdown, and this is basically an opportunity for us to compare ourselves to the national numbers. And we're accumulating listings far faster than the rest of the nation. Interesting one, 81% of home sellers expect offers to meet or exceed expectations. And in my world, I don't think it's quite that high in Gilroy, but it's probably 50%. But I think 81% is probably a pretty solid number, even though this is a national number. A definitive 81% of recent survey respondents expected to receive either their asking price or more in seller negotiations. And 70% of potential sellers thinking it's a good time to sell due to the increased value of their homes and the limited inventory available, according to Realtor.com. So that's the perception, right? This is from April of 2025, April 17th, 2 days ago. And this is a reality that folks are going to have to deal with in realizing that, at least in this market, if I'm talking to you about selling your home in San Jose, the inventory is huge now. The inventory is up 90%. So there's likely to be some headwinds there. I think the thing that's going to fascinate me the most is how much above or below asking price. What do we see happening? Do we continue to see above asking price? Because that's the other thing that kind of clues me into this drop in days on market, is because A, these are homes that just listed, B, they're homes that just listed and are the best examples in their home type, and because of that, folks are offering more for them, right? Does that make sense? I think that's how we explain this contradiction in some of the data that we've seen. Excuse me. Let's see. There was another one. All of these reasons for selling took a backseat to location, though, with 46% of respondents listing this as their reason to move. Absolutely. And I think they're phrasing this in a way to make it least offensive. But in my experience, in talking with folks who are thinking about listing their homes, a huge chunk, a far bigger chunk than historically has been the case, are looking to leave the area, but not just leave the area, they're looking to leave the state. Which is a big change. I know I've mentioned this before, but back in the olden days, about 80% of people whose homes I sold were going to stay in the area. Sometimes in the same city. They were just downsizing or upsizing or whatever, but didn't want to leave. They loved it here, right? Totally the opposite. Now 80% of the folks I talk to are not only looking to leave, they're looking to leave the state. And the state of California has seen a decrease in population for the last few years. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's just getting worse. Every once in a while, there'll be a news story that comes out about what the California state government plans on doing. Whether it's financing another huge expense, whether it's free medical care for all Californians, including folks here illegally. I'll get calls immediately, like within days of a news item like that coming out and going, hey, my feeling is the first thing they're going to do is turn to homeowners through taxation to try to pay for some of this stuff. So I want out. I had someone like that middle of last year, and they were adamant. They're like, I'm out. Not only were they out, they went off, bought a place before their place here even sold, and they were gone. Anyway, okay, so let's talk mortgage rates. Interest rates are not awesome right now, but these are real numbers. Instead of sorting these by relevance, let's sort them by low monthly payment. And they were already sorted that way. So this is what we're doing. We're taking the Morgan Hill average purchase price, $1.43 million, with 20% down. How much would that cost you? And it's assuming that you've got a good credit score. I turned off the other option, so this is just for a 30-year fixed. But your monthly payment would be $6,852. But check this out. Your upfront costs, your points and origination fees and underwriting fees comes to $23,237. Kind of crazy, right? So that's where we are. And I think that's kind of tells the story in one small way as to what is suppressing buyers. I think interest rates are absolutely playing a part. But I think there's so much uncertainty about what's coming that it's just really putting the cold shoulder on buyers coming out. And what's interesting is we're seeing sellers coming out at the same rate or in some cases a little more than last year, but not by much. It's really much just on par with last year in terms of new listings. We saw 41% in Santa Clara County overall increase. So yeah, I guess that's not a small increase, 34% increase in San Jose. So we've definitely seen an uptick in the number of sellers who want to sell. And I think the sad news is many of them, in terms of what their expectations are for the market, them wanting to go on the market because they feel like the market is hot and working in their favor. I feel like that bus may have already left. And folks who are looking to sell now are going to have a problem. And also, most of the agents that are out there today have only existed in a seller's market. They don't understand how to aggressively market to get homes sold in markets where buyers are more and more in the driver's seat. Now, I always market aggressively. My philosophy is the more eyeballs, the better the chance that you're going to get what your client wants for the house or more. That's always been borne out. So I always aggressively overmarket my listings. And I go to a lot of extra expense to do that, which as soon as you say those words, 99% of other agents aren't going to do that. They're not going to expend an extra X amount of thousands of dollars doing marketing or other types of things to get more attention to a property. But that's what's going to have to happen to be able to get that attention, right? A small percentage of the homes being listed are getting sold. And that leans into the other problem. If you're thinking about selling your home in 2025, start that process now. You're already behind, is my point. Because what needs to happen is you need an honest assessment of your property. What needs to happen to make it one of those best in category properties we talked about earlier? We need your home to be one of the few homes that gets listed that sells in that 10, 20 day time frame, right? You don't want to languish on the MLS for a super long time. And the only way to do that is you got to have digital curb appeal, you have to have physical curb appeal, and you have to dazzle when someone walks through that house. And one of the things that's truly missing in today's marketing is digital curb appeal. If you ever have some time on your hands, go up onto Zillow or any one of these sites, Realtor.com or wherever, and look at some of the photos that get posted of homes. It's crazy to me. It's also a disconnect to me when you see descriptions of what the realtor thought was amazing about the house in the description, but there's no photos of that thing. Why is there no photo of that thing? But anyway, that's just another thing that annoys me. Next, let's talk about my website. Now this is the site. It's soldbyrobert.com. It's got a quick blurb of why I'm supposed to be so awesome. But the key thing here is you being able to get a instant value estimate. And this is the tool I was telling you about, where I have noticed while the Zillows and the Trulias and the Redfins and all the others will change what the estimated value of the home is after it gets listed to be more in line with the list price, this does not do that. So if we just do 1, 2, 3, here we go, Moorhead. Let's just do that one. That's it. It's done. I didn't have to give an email address. I didn't have to do anything else, but you get to see the numbers. So look at that. What the heck is that curve? That's bizarre. Maybe it doesn't like my browser. But anyway, if you want to get more info, you can provide your email address, and it'll give you this information every month. Now, here's the awesome thing. All the things that tool tells you are things I've advised my clients to do at least once a year to assess your overall position, understand your home standing in the market, and how you can tap into the value of your home if you need to or want to give you just all the options. Have all the data. Well, this does that for you automatically, and instead of doing it once a year, it does it every month. So totally an awesome tool. As you saw, it works with anything in the country, not just the area that I serve. So feel free to jump in and use that if you'd like. To give you a quick view here of what else you get. So it gives the home value estimator. It has the home equity tool. It has the home purchase options. It has the refinance calculator. And what's great about the refinance calculator is it'll come right out and say, see how the numbers are red right here? I know, pointing with my fingers isn't going to help you, is it? If you go to this one, see how there's red X's and stuff? It's telling you don't refinance. It doesn't make sense to refinance. 30-year fixed or 15-year fixed doesn't make sense. But it'll also tell you if you pay just each month over, this is how much you'll save over the life of your loan. Great tool. I have established a partnership with a lender right here in Morgan Hill. So if in this refinance thing, it looks like a good opportunity for you, you can just click the link and it'll immediately take you to a guy who can give you real world numbers on what your refinance would be. It gives you a mortgage summary, other important options, which includes there's selling signals or not selling signals, how much purchasing power you might have. You could use X amount of dollars for if you needed to tap into it for emergencies, just all kinds of good stuff. Net worth of home renting tool. And this one's great. So it's got sliding. You can figure out for how much you would charge versus how frequently you do it, a nightly rate, number of nights, monthly revenue. It lets you break all of it down and do some what ifs that are just great if you're thinking about potentially renting out your home. So feel free to take advantage of that. Finally, if you've got any questions, we've got about 5 minutes, and I can go a little longer. I'm actually kind of surprised I made it all the way. But we can chat about any of these points of data. Now, here's something interesting. If we just click on Morgan Hill, for instance, look at that. Anything below 50 is leaning into a buyer's market. Anything over 50 is leaning into a seller's market, and they consider right now prices to be stable. Or meaning moving forward, prices will be stable. So not big increases. I think that's super interesting. The investor forecast, long-term growth, say longer-term growth, they consider that to be average. And I think long-term growth is 5 to 10 years. Yeah. But again, for the near term, most people sell a home after 5 years. Hasn't been true more recently. People have been holding on to their homes a little longer. We can look at monthly and see where we're at. 1.3 million, 1.3 million, or 1.4, I guess, was right here. But if you've got any other areas you're interested in, we could try Phoenix. because remember I talked about Phoenix before. Let's do the metro of Phoenix. And these are numbers that I look at least weekly, just to get a feel. Metro. There we go. Okay, so there's the Phoenix metro area, which is obviously gigantic. But let's see here. So look at that flattening. I have a really good friend who just bought in Phoenix, and boy, I feel like he may have just missed it. But look at that. So things have dropped. Obviously, we've got all this to contend with, right, where it was at its bottom in 2011, 2012. But the forecast here is actually pretty good, above average. Long-term growth, not so much. But I actually think that the reality, I think that's optimistic. If we were to for sale inventory, if we look at that, look at the dramatic increase we've had. It was down here in the lowest levels, and now we're at a point where we're, I think, 18,700. I think we're at the peak. No, 19,033. But at this point, this is in November. If we look at past Marches, I mean, let's see, 2023. So March. Let's see, March of 2024. Look at that. Look at that. Compared to 1 year ago. It's insane. So inventory numbers are just wacky and continuing to be wacky. But that's about it. I don't see any questions. No requests for data on other areas. So I guess we'll call it there, and I will go and take some Sudafed and a nap. Anyway, thanks again, everybody, for spending your Saturday morning with me. I appreciate it. I hope that this has been useful. Again, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker and realtor right here in Silicon Valley. If you've got any questions, concerns, ideas, goals that you'd like to discuss with me, that you want to reach in real estate, feel free to do so. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com, and I look forward to potentially hearing from you. Have a great day.